Welcome to the Forge Truth Podcast, where we are building great men as God defines greatness. Forge is a movement of men with a mission to help all men realize they are the deeply beloved, redeemed sons of the Most High God. I'm your producer, Zach, and today we're doing something a little bit differently. We have a message from Pete Ochs, a successful businessman who felt called to ministry in the prison system. It's a great message delivered at Forge, and we're going to present it to you here today. Enjoy.
I was standing there and everything sounded muffled, like everyone was far off in the distance. I remember that vividly. We went out to have this fight, and it escalated where I ended up taking his life. Looking down at my friend, it was like, what just happened? I mean, what kind of person kills their friend? Hutch was the bottom of the barrel. If you get in trouble anywhere else, that's where they would send you. Very first day in prison, we had a riot in the chow hall. And I can remember I was so scared, but I was fighting for my life. I seen guys laying on the floor. There was puddles of blood. There was one guy laying there with his teeth all busted out of his face. I came to a quick realization, like, this is for real. I'm gonna die here. This is it. I'm gonna die. And that one, there was no hope. That was probably the hardest part.
I had never been in a prison before. And so when we walked in there and the doors clanged shut, I thought, it's a great idea, but there's no way this is going to work. It was a huge challenge. I guess maybe we were desperate. We have a company called Electrics. We build electrical assemblies. And we have another company called the Seat King. We build industrial seating.
For the inmates, it was a huge thing because they were paying hourly wages now. Before, we were only making 60 cents a day.
We will only hire the best of the best, as it were. So it's a real incentive for the inmates to be good in prison because they can now go and work in a job that pays them $80 or $100 a day instead of 50 cents a day.
I used to hate phone calls because I think at that time, just to accept the call was a $2 charge. And then it was $1.29 every minute.
If you're making 50 cents a day, you don't spend much time talking to your family. But it's so important because the relationship with their families is probably one of the key things that reduces recidivism.
The second chance started when I got my job at Seat King. People started believing in me. People started seeing a different attitude. That was where the seeds were planted. That's where the second chance started.
These are murderers and rapists and drug dealers. But as I really got to know them and really became friends with them, I came to understand while they had done very bad things, they were still created by the creator of the universe. And when I understood the little that I did to see a movement in them, it really gave me hope for what a business could do and what the rest of us need to do, particularly those of us who are in influential positions and can do something about it, what we should really do. And so it gave me a whole new vision as to how and why business should be done.
Pete's been a very good man in my life. Not too many people have had that kind of father figure in their lives.
With Pete himself, that's an amazing man. When they come out here, they shake your hand, they know you by name, they know who you are.
You know, being able to come out here every day and not be treated like an actual inmate, but to be treated like an employee.
Our philosophy of business is this. The main thing we need to do is we want to lead with economic capital. We want to give them a good job. The second thing we want to do is we want to respect them as individuals. We want to have deep, authentic relationships with them. And then the third thing, we let the Lord figure out how to open those doors of spiritual capital, and that typically happens.
So parole time came. Well, Pete was out of the country. He literally flew from out of the country to this country to go speak for me and fight for me. If that's not a friendship or if that's not love, I don't know what is, man.
Louis is a phenomenal artist, and so I think Louis has been out maybe a year and a half now. For the first year, he became a tattoo artist, and he wanted to open his own tattoo shop. So I helped Louis figure out a business plan, and about 3 months ago, he opened his own tattoo shop.
Well, it's my second chance. I wasn't supposed to get this. I was supposed to die in there. I was never supposed to be out here. And to be able to do what I'm doing now, that's redemption. Pete and C. King, they taught us all these things that we're doing out here too.
They brought a hope to a dark place.
It's afforded me an opportunity to help pay for my daughter's college. As a father figure that's in my daughter's life, but not every day because I'm in prison, I'm still able to help my daughter succeed at what she wants to do by helping her pay for college. So it's been a very good blessing that I'm able to do that.
It's an unbelievable thing to see a man that has no hope come to hope. I think in business we become hardened to the bottom line. And I think business is really about people. And I think we should be in business to really transform society. When we started to really love those guys as we loved ourselves, and we saw transformation happen, it really gave me a whole new vision for what I could do as a business person. And it's been terrific.
Well, thank you guys. It's great to be here. I was 38 years old, sitting at my desk contemplating life, and it didn't take very long for me to figure out that life was really good. I was 38. I was married to a lovely lady who had stayed with me and hung through a startup business 8 years earlier that was really a difficult time for me. I had 2 really good kids. We were in a great church. We had great friends. There was one problem. I had a multi-million-dollar lawsuit sitting in front of me that I was going to lose. You see, the year before I'd acquired a bank. It was in trouble. It was a troubled bank. And so in my zest to clean that thing up, I was repossessing assets right and left. I was suing people. I was doing whatever I needed to do to clean this bank up. And one of my customers countersued me. And when I took that lawsuit to my attorneys, he goes, here's the problem. The guy you bought the bank from defrauded that customer. He violated lending laws, and you bought the stock of the bank, and you own all the liabilities, including all the stuff that he had too. And so he said, you just ought to settle. You just ought to settle now. You just ought to say uncle and be done with it. And I said, I've worked my tail off to get to almost 40 years of age. The last thing I'm going to do is say uncle. That's, justice will prevail. So we started depositions on a Monday. By Tuesday afternoon, I knew I was in trouble. We were getting nowhere. And I could just see the attorneys on the other side were milking this deal out. Wednesday, I began to panic. I'm in God's Word morning and night saying, what should I do? Friday morning, I get up. I'm in my quiet time. I'm in Proverbs 6. And the Ochs translation of Proverbs 6, the first few verses of that says, if you've gotten yourself in a jam, go humble yourself and beg to get out of the jam. All day on Friday, as I'm going through this deposition, all the lawyers are asking all the questions and whatever. The only thing I could think about was go humble yourself and beg to get out of the jam. At the end of the day on Friday, I walked over to the man suing me and I said, Len, could we talk about this? I knew him not well, but I knew him. His attorney was standing there, and he turns to his attorney and says, hey, can I compete and I talk about this lawsuit? And the guy said, yeah, that's great. His attorney gave us permission. So on Sunday afternoon at 2 o'clock, I went to Lynn's office, and I sat down, and he comes in, and he wasn't in a great mood, and I thought, ooh, this isn't good. Anyway, folks, you got to understand, desperate people do desperate things. So I get up out of my chair, I walk over, I get down on my knees in front of his desk, and I said, Lynn, I'm a Christian, and Friday morning I'm reading in my quiet time, says, if you've gotten yourself in a jam, go humble yourself, beg get out of the jam. This lawsuit will break me. I will go bankrupt, and I'm begging you, let me out of this lawsuit. As I finished, he began to weep. He said, Pete, I knew the lawsuit was wrong, but I didn't know how to get out of it. 5 minutes later, the lawsuit was settled. Guys, for the first time in my life, I understood that my business life and my Christian life were not bifurcated. They weren't two things. They're this. I was really a good guy. I was really a good businessman 6 days a week, and I was really a good Christian on Sunday. But man, I never had pushed those two things together, and it changed the way I viewed life. Here's what I want to do this morning. I want to answer two questions. What does a transformed business look like? Because that thing transformed my business. So I want to answer the first question. What does a transformed business look like? And the second thing I want to talk to you about is, if we're going to have a transformed business, I don't think you can have one without a transformed leader. So what does it look like for you and I if we're going to transform a business and leadership? In 2005, we had a rapidly growing manufacturing company, and we just simply didn't have enough labor to make that business work. We happened to be in a small town in Kansas, and there happened to be a maximum security state prison in that town. I heard about a work release program where you could, the prison would literally load inmates up in a bus, drive them to your place of work. You'd work them for the day, and they'd take them back to prison at night. So I did that. I had 10 guys. I did that for a month, and it was great. These guys worked hard. I liked it. So I went back to the warden and said, "Hey, I need 10 more guys." And he said, "I don't have 10 more. All of our work release guys are taken." But he said, "We're getting ready to vacate about 20,000 square feet inside this prison." It was a maximum security prison. If you want to move your business inside the prison, I got 400 guys. And I said, "I'm in." So in fact, I thought to myself, this is perfect, because these guys are a bunch of murderers, rapists, and bad guys. I'm going to get them in there, and I'm going to make them pay for their sins. I'm going to work these guys silly. Number 2, they'll show up on time. Number 3, they'll come in uniform every day. And so, I got in that prison, and I had no idea what the inside of a maximum security prison is like. Guys, it is terrible. Most guys spend 12 hours a day in a 5-foot by 9-foot cell. 12 hours a day. 43% of those men in there have mental illness problems, and you can figure out why if you're living in a cage. The minute you come in, if you're a newbie, and the minute you come into prison, you are immediately preyed upon by the gangs, because they are building their gangs, and what they promise you is safety. And the only relationships you have in there is to join the gang to be safe. You do not understand how rampant drugs are in a maximum security prison. It's amazing. I don't know how they get in. It still buffaloes me. But I'm looking at this desert of human flourishing inside this maximum security prison. So we get in there, and we get 20 guys working, and about 3, 4, 5 months in, I realized that maybe the only difference between those guys and me is that they got caught, okay? I'm being a bit facetious here, but you know what I mean. A lot of these guys got in there because of a stupid couple minutes in their life. So I said to myself, what can we do? God really convicted me that I wasn't in there to work these guys. I was in there to change their lives. And I began to study, what does human flourishing look like? And I came across Genesis 2:15 and 16. And Genesis 2:15 says, "I put man in the garden to work." And I think the first thing you need if you're going to flourish in life is a job. Because then from that you get material provision, food, clothing, shelter, and all the stuff you need. The second thing you need is found in verse 18, Genesis 2:18. It's not good for man to be alone. The second thing we all need is deep, authentic relationships. And I think that's a really, really important thing. And the third thing we need is found in verse 16, 17. By the way, don't eat of the fruit of that tree over there, because then you'll know the difference between good and evil. It's the first time God gave us a moral code, rules to live by. So the third thing we need are rules to live by. So you need a good job, you need friends, and you need rules to live by. We put a fancy name on that called economic, social, and spiritual capital. I gave you a card here, and if you look at that card on the transformation side, on the left-hand side, you'll see a couple of dollar signs, an arrow, and then this triangle, economic, social, spiritual capital. I think a transformed business, okay, is a business that creates flourishing, and I'm going to define flourishing as giving people a good job, loving them like you love yourselves, and sharing the good news of Jesus with them at some point in time. I believe that is the purpose of business. The purpose of business is to be a catalyst for flourishing, as it were. So once I had this vision for what we needed to do, give them a good job, love them like we love ourselves, and share Jesus with them. I remember I said, I need to cast this vision to these guys. So once a month, we bring all of our employees together and we have a leadership lunch. So at our leadership lunch, and this was 4 or 5 months in, I stood up in front of them. I said, guys, I've got a vision for you. And here's the vision. We're going to have the best prison in the United States of America. And they looked at me and they slapped their legs and started laughing and they said, that's an oxymoron. And then I said, here's the way we're going to do that. My promise to you is I'm going to help, the way we're going to have the best prison is my promise to you is I'm going to help you become the best person you can become. And it was silent. 4 or 5 of those guys grabbed onto that vision, and the guy that you saw in this video right here, Louis Gutierrez, picked that up. He was in for life. He had no parole. He had murdered a guy when he was 17 years old. By the way, Louis bought into our vision, wrote a 40-page manual on how to be the best inmate, went back inside the prison walls, transformed his cell wing, got the attention of the state of Kansas. He applied for a parole hearing, didn't get it the first time, but applied again 3 years later, and Louis got out, okay? By the way, Louis made about $300,000 last year in his little Redemption Inc. tattoo business, and he's getting ready to sign probably a $2 million deal with Hulu. So, I mean, transformation happens. So, what does this transformation look like economically, socially, and spiritually? What did we do inside the prison to move the needle? First of all, if you work for the state of Kansas in prison, you make $1 a day. You're making license tags, maybe furniture for the state, maybe sewing clothes for other prisons, but you make $1 a day. We pay our average wage in prison is $16 an hour. So the first thing we're going to do is give them a good job and pay them. I think economically we train them. I would say half the guys that come to us can't even read a tape measure. They've been dealing drugs, they've been doing crazy stuff all their life, but they can't even read a tape measure. So we train them well. I think the third thing we do is we hold them accountable. Guys, I never realized what giving a good job to somebody meant for your self-esteem. There are guys that come up to me all the time and say, I had no idea what it meant to really work a good day's job. We bring extreme accountability, and these guys love it. I will just tell you that. What does social capital look like in a prison? It starts out, and you've heard me say this, it starts by loving them like you love yourself. But we do a lot of things to try to make them a really good person. We have 15,000 hours of online training that's free to them. You can become a black belt in lean manufacturing. You can become an engineer. You can become an entrepreneur. And we help them and we give them this. Our goal is to be the best place to work. We want to be the best place to work. And so we do whatever it takes. We help them with their families. We have our employees volunteer with their kids. There'll be volunteer parents for their kids for these men that are in prison. So we do all these things socially we can to help them out. And spiritually, essentially what we try to do is we believe that we should really follow the parable of the Good Samaritan. You remember that parable. The guy, there was a traveler, he was beat up, left for dead along the side of the road. Said the priest and the Levite, the spiritual guys came along, said they walked around him. And I think they were thinking, if that guy just get Jesus, everything would be fine. But that's not the way it works. So we want to, on the 3 forms of capital, we want to lead with economic capital. We want to give them a good job first. The second thing we want to do is we want to love them like we love ourselves. And when you do that, everybody has difficult times during their lives. And if you do those things, you will have earned the right to be heard, and they will come to you at some point in time and say, hey, I am hurting, what's the deal? And that's where we get to share the gospel with them. And we've seen tremendously powerful times in doing that. We want to follow the example of 1 Peter 3:15. Be prepared to give a reason for the hope that is in you with gentleness and respect. And we found this thing works. You know, we employ about 800 folks in Mexico in a couple of businesses. We got about 150 folks with the civilians in the United States. When you give them a good job, when you love them like you love yourselves, and you're prepared to share the good news with them, it happens. We probably employ about 1,000 people total. We see 30 to 40 people come to Christ almost on an annual basis of people that are working for us. And it's just because we're intentional about it, but we're not beating them over the head with the Bible. Another thing we did in the church, in the prison, was there was really no place to worship. We wound up building about $1 million church inside of the prison. And now there's 23 faiths that can use it, but I'm telling you that that has been an amazing thing in itself. We also started a seminary. We've graduated 80 men out of a 3-year seminary, and these inmates are going back inside of the walls, behind the walls, and they're transforming the prison. I believe we do have the best prison in the United States because these men are going back and sharing the love of Jesus there with them. So what are the results of all this work? Recidivism in the United States is about 70%. So that's a percentage over 5 years, during a 5-year time, 70% of the men that are in prison go back to prison. Our recidivism rate is 7%. When you multiply that times 30,000 a year that it takes to house an inmate, it's an amazing thing. I will tell you, generosity has been a big part of what we do. We have a generosity matching program. I was in the prison about 4 or 5 months ago, and one of the guys came running up to me and said, "Pete, you're not going to believe it. My mom's house burned down, and she has no insurance." But he says, he got a big smile on his face. He says, "You don't have to, I can't believe it, but my fellow inmates in 24 hours raised $12,500 for his mom." These are guys that make $16 an hour. We had one of our civilian, we bring civilians into the prison. We employ about 225 men in 2 different prisons now. We've got about 125,000 square feet of manufacturing space. So it's a serious business inside of a maximum security prison. We had one of our supervisors come down with cancer and wanted to try a new form of therapy. Insurance wouldn't cover. Inmates raised $16,000 to cover his. These are guys, our inmates outgive our civilians about 4 to 1. And I think it's because they're so thankful for what they have because they're in a desert of human flourishing. We had a lady in Mexico, young lady, got very sick, went to the public hospital. They gave her a couple aspirin, told her to go home. She went home, got deathly sick. Some of her fellow employees were checking on her, and they said, "We got to get you to the hospital." Our 800 employees in Zacatecas, Mexico, who make about $5 an hour, raised $4,500 for this lady and sent her to a private hospital. And they found out she had an appendicitis. They took it out. She was well. As she was recovering in the room that night, she led another 85-year-old lady to Christ. So it's amazing what can happen when you just really love people like you love yourself. I believe the purpose of business is to be a catalyst for flourishing. That's the answer to question number 1. What does a transformed business look like? You need to create economic, social, and spiritual wealth or capital for people. Let me talk about question number 2. What's our responsibility? You can't have a transformed business without a transformed leader. So what does transformed leadership look like? I want you to take a look at that same sheet there on transformation on the right-hand side under personal. You'll see a triangle there called success. Guys, here's what the world's calling us to. The world's calling us to success. And I think success is defined best in 1 John 2:15-16. Do not love the world or anything in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For everything in the world, the cravings of sinful man, possessions, the lust of his eyes, pleasure, and the boasting of what he has and does, pride, comes not from the Father but from the world. You see, pride, pleasure, and possessions, those first 3 things you see there. is what the world's calling us to. Those 3 P's, I think, are a theme that goes through the entire Bible. If you go back to Adam and Eve, they held the apple up and they said, boy, it tastes good, possessions. It's beautiful, pleasure, and it'll make me like God, pride. Fast forward to Solomon. This guy owned more stuff than anybody else did. He had 1,000 concubines. I'm still trying to get my head around that. And third, he was the wisest man in the world. He had pride, pleasure, and possessions. I think of Jesus when he came out of the 40 days, okay? He was tempted with pride, pleasure, and possessions by the devil. And I think that's what you and I are tempted with. That's what the world is calling us. If I look at my life, I would say my 30s was my time of pursuing success. I'm a Kansas farm kid. Went to Kansas University. I was going to be a dentist. My junior year, I took a business class to figure out, I was going to be a dentist, an orthodontist. I took this business class to figure out how I was going to manage all the money I was going to make, and as a dentist. And about 2 weeks into this class, I'm going, I'm not a dentist, I'm a business guy. Plus, you probably don't want these farmer hens in your mouth. I couldn't get these hens in your mouth. And so, man, I started my business career. And, but I was consumed with work and success in my 30s. I will tell you, I went from a banking job working 9 to 5 to being my own man, working 5 to 9. I went from making $40,000 a year to $10,000 a year. I did that for about 2 years. I was working 7 days a week. And my wife finally came to me and said, you need to go get a real job. And so I negotiated a deal with her. I said I wouldn't work on Sundays and I only work a half day on Saturdays. And guess what happened to my business, guys? It took off. So I was violating one of the 10 Commandments, honor the Sabbath. And I think if we're going to be successful, we've got to honor God's laws. And so I will tell you, there were still some bumps during my 30s. Several times my wife dragged me off to the counselor, and I didn't like it at one bit. But you know, I'll tell you, it's certain times you got to do some of this stuff. You see, what God wants us to do is He wants us to move from success, the left-hand triangle, to surrender on the right-hand triangle. And to do that, we've got to do what's in the green triangle, the green arrow there, and that is we have to die to ourselves. Galatians 2:20, I have been crucified with Christ, and I no longer live, but Christ lives in me. The life I live in the body, I live by faith in the Son of God who loved me and gave Himself for me. Do we understand what it means to be crucified with Christ? Do we understand what crucifixion really means? And do we know that the new life we live is now lived by faith and it's not by sight? I think success is very much driven by a sight kind of life. But God is calling us to surrender. You see, a surrendered life, if you look at the 3 triangles on the right, the words in those are the antidotes to pride, pleasure, and possessions. You see, pride is about serving yourself, but when you die to yourself, you're going to serve others. Pleasure is about me. It's about arrogance in some sense. But I think what God's calling us to is excellence for Him. And I think possessions, of course, is about possessions, and He doesn't want us to think about that. He wants us to be stewards. He doesn't want us to be owners. And so there is a problem that I've found in moving from success to surrender, and that's that thing you'll see on the top there called significance. You'll see success, significance, and surrender. Here's what I found. Guys, I will tell you, God's used several things in my life. One of those was the lawsuit I told you about. And I think at the end of my 30s, God takes you through trials to move you from success to significance to surrender. He used the lawsuit to move me from success to significance, okay? When I did that, I came to understand the difference between ownership and stewardship. And I think this is a really key point. We need to understand that we're stewards and not owners. Unfortunately, in my 40s, I thought stewardship meant financial generosity. So I just put the hammer down and made as much money in my business to be a good steward. And unfortunately, what happened is I became proud in my giving. You see, I just traded the scorecard of the net operating income on my income statement to my giving. I just looked at my giving thing. It just became a different scorecard, but the scorecard was still about me. And when you move to surrender, the scorecard isn't about you. It's really about what are we doing for God. And I think that's just really, really important. I will tell you today, I think my 30s were a success. I think my 40s were being significant. We ran our business great. We made a lot of money. We gave a lot of money away. 9/11 hit, the dot-com bubble hit, and I went through another trial in 2000. And we came this close to going bankrupt. Black ink went to red ink, generosity ceased. Pete looked at God and said, "Don't you understand what I've done for you?" And he says, "I don't want your money, I want you." And so at that point in time, I said, I'm gonna try this one more time and we'll see what this surrender thing looks like. Now, I'd love to tell you that I live a surrendered life. Once in a while I do. I'm gonna talk about that in a minute. I'm really good at being significant. And here's why. Because I love living with one foot in the world and one foot in the kingdom. Because I get the best of both worlds. But here's what Jesus says about being significant. Revelation 3:15. I wish you were either cold, successful, or hot, surrendered. But no, you're lukewarm. You're significant. And I'm going to spit you out of my mouth. Here is what guys, God will get you because he loves you. He wants you to move from success to surrender. And he's going to get you there one of two ways. Voluntarily or involuntarily. And trust me, don't go the involuntary route. Some of you are going, I would guess that most of you are going through some trial in your life today. Here's what I'm going to encourage you to do. Embrace the trial. What we want to do, particularly in the success mode, is to fight off the trial. Just embrace James 1. Consider it pure joy, brothers, when you encounter trials of various kinds, knowing that the testing of your faith develops perseverance. And let perseverance have its perfect result, that you will be mature and complete, not lacking anything. You see, the reason I went through the lawsuit, the reason God took me through 9/11 is I was not mature and I was not complete. And I'm still going through trials at 73 years of age today. It's just the way it is. But that's what we got to do. I don't like the word surrender. I don't consider myself a surrendered kind of guy. Surrender is not waving the white flag, though. Surrender is not quitting. When I went through this whole thing in 2001, I really convinced myself that I was bad at business and I needed to go from business to ministry. I read the book Halftime, and I thought it was a little higher calling to be in ministry than business. And so I said, Lord, I understand where you want me. I'm going to do that. I had a couple of mentors that had been walking with me for 20 and 25 years. By the way, guys, those guys one walked with me for 40 years, one walked with me for 45 years. And I'm telling you, if you don't have a mentor, get one. And there's three kinds of mentors. There's typically older guys, and they give you a historical look at where his life is going. Then I have a peer mentor. He gives me a real-time look. He's looking at the world the way I'm looking at the world. And then I got a couple of younger guys. I've got a couple of younger guys that I consider my mentors. One happens to be my son. And I so respect these folks because they're giving me a look at the future and they keep me young. but for sure get yourself a mentor. So I had these two mentors. I cooked up my plan on how I was going to sell my businesses. I took them to lunch, and I said, guys, God's doing a real work in me. Business has not been great, and I'm bad at business, in fact, and I'm going into the ministry. I'm going to sell my businesses. They looked at me and they said, they were stunned for a minute. And one of them finally got himself together, and he kind of leans across the table and he said, if you think you're bad in business, you've not seen bad until you've gotten to ministry. Surrender's not jumping to the next ship. It's hanging in there. I have lived surrendered a time or two a few times in my life. I'm really good at being significant. I will tell you a couple of examples of surrender. In the 90s, I was in the commercial banking business in my 20s. At 30, I started my own investment banking company. So from 30 to 50, we were on the buy side of the M&A deal, and we were helping people buy companies. I violated the number one rule of business, which is don't fall in love with your inventory. And I had a couple of businesses that I really liked and were really good, and we wound up buying them ourselves. So we wound up having this little portfolio of companies. And during the 90s, my wife and I also happened to, we did ourselves and a couple other couples founded a Christian school, and this thing just took off and was growing, and we had no place to go. We were in a church, and we'd outgrown that church, and we needed several millions of dollars to build a new building and kind of move the church on. And we tried raising that money for a year or two and just had no success in raising that money. My wife came to me on a Friday and said, Pete, by now we had 4 or 5 businesses, and she said, you need to take this one particular business and sell that thing and build that school. And of course she picked the business that was easiest to run and made the most money. Literally. And we did not have a good weekend. I'll just put it. It was terrible. But she won. And so on Monday morning, I called a couple of public companies up that were wanting us. This particular business happened to be in the medical field, and 90% of our revenues came from Medicare and the government, okay? Long story short, we signed a deal, and I sold that business, and we got the school built, and everything was great. 2 weeks after I signed the contract to sell that business, Congress passed a 40% reduction in our Medicare, Medicaid benefits. The public company that bought us ultimately went bankrupt a year and a half later. Well, it's really funny, as we were supposed to close on May 1st, and I had sent a bunch of stock working with NCF on this deal, and Howard Dayton, probably some of you guys know Howard Dayton. I'd sent some money to Crown Ministries. Howard didn't get his stock certificates back on time. We were supposed to close May 1, and the president of this company was going on vacation. I'm going, this guy's going to go on vacation, figure out what a bad deal this was, and not close the deal. And I was mad at Howard. Howard's a really good friend of mine. And long story short, came back and we closed on May 8th, okay? In October of this year, Congress passed, of that year, this was in the late 90s, Congress passed a reduction in the capital gains tax rate from 28% to 20%, retroactive to May 8th. Saved us $1 million in taxes. I was mad as hops at Howard, and now I love the guy, you know. It's crazy. So anyway, surrender. There's no way. I fought to the death not to sell that business. And thank God I called my mentors up, and they said, I'd listen to your wife. And the moral of that story, guys, is listen to your wife. I'm telling you. I will tell you another thing where I had to surrender, and this is, I never thought this would happen. 7 years ago, I transferred the stewardship of our businesses over to my son. I literally sold him our companies. And I remember sitting at the table getting ready to sign the stock certificates over to my son. Now you got to understand, my son's a lot like me, and the apple didn't fall far from the tree, but it fell from the tree, okay? And I hired a succession coach, and that guy looked at my personality, he looked at my son's personality, and he said, you're not just gonna, you want to just kind of fade off into the sunset and retire. He goes, that ain't the way this is gonna work. You need to leave. I will tell you guys, after 40 years of starting a business, I was there on Friday and I was gone on Monday. It was the most traumatic time of my life. As much as I'd preached stewardship and all this good stuff, it came, the chickens came home to roost and I didn't like it. But I will tell you, I did it because I knew I needed to do it, and I didn't like it one bit. I would not have surrendered that thing if I could have. But I will tell you today, I would not be standing here today if I wouldn't have done that. Guys, I will tell you, I have never been more focused, I've never been more fired up than I am today, and it wouldn't have happened if I wouldn't have stepped out of business, and because God had something greater and bigger for me. I really believe that. I don't know what surrender looks like for you, but I will tell you it's giving up, and you want to seek real counsel. You want to be in God's Word like crazy, but living a surrendered life is really what and where we need to be. The question: you can't have a transformed business without a transformed leader, and what you and I need to do is we need to move from being the pursuit of success to totally being surrendered. Let me wrap this up. If you take those two things and flip to the other side of the page here, what we have here is this graphic on the right-hand side hangs in every one of our offices and buildings in our business. This is the way we run business. So essentially what you'll see here is you see the dark blue triangle, and you can see that is the purpose of business, creating economic, social, and spiritual capital. And then inside of that, we've merged the personal transformation, which is really our 4 values. So the 4 values of our business are honor God, serve people, pursue excellence, and be a good steward. All right? You'll see 4 words there: principles, people, practices, and performance. We believe that principles define people, people determine practices, and practices drive performance. Everything starts with principles. So if you don't get your principles right, you're not going to get where you need to get. I'm an absolute believer in that. There's this language, we talk about principles and values and these kinds of things. I really believe that principles and values are different. I believe that principles are the roots, values are the fruits. Values are what result from you living out your principles. So if you look under people, if you go back and look under principles, the gold triangle, honor God. If you honor God, your people will become people of character. If you go to serve people, the second triangle up, then it goes down to the second thing under people called connection. If you serve people, you're going to learn to connect with people. Lastly, then we're talking about the pursuit of excellence. If you pursue excellence, you will be a person of competence. And if you're going to be a good steward, you will be committed. So you see our principles, honor God, serve people, be excellent, be a good steward, translate into our people, our values. And that people thing is really the culture in your business. We drive all of the culture in our business around 4 words: character, connection, competence, commitment. If you walk in, this will be hanging up on the wall. If you walked into our business and asked whether it's a prison in Mexico, wherever, and somebody's been there 6 or 8 months, and you walk up to him and say, hey, how does Pete run his business? They will turn right around, they'll point to this, and they say, well, we start by honoring God, then we serve, and they'll just rip you through it. And they'll say, what that does is I wind up being a person of character, connection, competence, and commitment. So we have this culture built in that's amazing. Now, it's taken years to do this, but the stories that I told you, and I could spend hours telling you more stories, is because of that culture. Culture eats strategy for breakfast, right? Peter Drucker. but you also need systems. So if you go and jump on the right-hand side of that triangle and look at the practices area, those are systems. I think James Clear says you don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. So you have to have great systems. So those 4 principles again, honor God is about our navigation. That navigation is our code word for leadership, okay? If you honor God, your leadership team will know where they're going. If you're going to serve people, that it will drive your culture. And you see that pursuit of excellence drives our strategy. That's about product and marketing. And you'll see that stewardship drives our cash. And because we've lived by those principles, our businesses are 3 and 4 times as profitable as the industry average. And it's because of those 4 principles, I believe. Because they translate themselves to a great culture, and they translate themselves to great systems. Great leadership, great culture, great strategy, and lots of cash. And when you see principles define people, people determine practices, practices drive performance, and the performance is you're going to have a transformed company creating economic, social, and spiritual wealth.